Hi, welcome to episode 221 of your favorite daily podcast. Today is going to be a UX episode. We haven't done that in a while, so I'm going to talk about some things about being a UX researcher and the difficult parts that people don't often talk about. And it's not just about getting buy-in from stakeholders. So I was at a networking event for like product people a couple of days ago, and someone was asking me about like what it's like to be a UX researcher and everything, and we were talking about like the skill of research and all of that, and they talked about a part. People often think that doing research is just talking to people, right? But it's not just talking to people. I'm not going to go into all the technicalities of how to and all the work that goes into like properly crafting, planning, scoping, conducting and analyzing research, because that's not the thing I want to focus on this episode. I've written a bit about this before, like some 4 or so years ago, and it's really about the things that I didn't know or expect about doing UX research and how it can actually affect you as a person who is doing that kind of research. Because when you're talking to people or when you're doing research with people, especially the qualitative kind of research where you're actually like engaging with them and not just sending a survey, there's a lot that can come up, things that you don't even expect. And I'm not saying that UX research is like therapy, although there are similar skills, and I would know because I was on track to become a therapist, and then I decided to come be UX researcher. But there are some similarities in technique and all of those things, and that's why in things that you don't expect can come up. So, for example, as a UX researcher, you could encounter trauma, and it's not just about like other people's trauma, because it can also trigger things about your own traumatic past, because you can be having a conversation with somebody about their financial habits because you're trying to build a financial savings app or whatever, and then you're hearing things about financial abuse or some other kind of thing, and those kinds of things stick with you, because when you're doing real research with real people, you hear things that you may not be prepared to handle, things about abuse, people in need, people surviving traumatic events, and things like that. And those things can trigger things about your own experiences that you may not be willing to deal with it, and that you're not even equipped to deal with in that instance. Or you could encounter some kind of quote unquote ism, racism, sexism, something else, and it's targeted at people of a, I don't know, the identity that you identify with, or for example. And so that can lead you to reliving trauma. You can also experience vicarious trauma, harassment, like all kinds of things can come up. I personally haven't had so many experiences like this, but I have spoken to people who have, and sometimes people's stories stick with you, and you're like, I keep telling people this. There's a research project I did in 2018, and there's one of the participants that I just can't forget. Like, it was a very sad thing that she had experienced. I was researching smartphone use. That was the research project. It was about smartphone use. And still, the topics that we ended up talking about, or that the participant ended up bringing up in the session, it was a lot. And I still think about it now, and I still think about, could I have done something for her? Should I have done something for her? Would it be unethical for me to do that? And things like that. It still stresses me out. I still think about it, and this is like almost 5 years later or 4 years later. Another thing that people don't often appreciate about UX research, and something that I didn't expect, and that really shook me is the mental exhaustion. There's like, you are talking to people, you're not just talking to people, because as you're talking to people, you're actively listening. At the same time, you're trying to drive the conversation to go forward. At the same time, you're listening for things so that you can debrief with your team afterwards, and you're doing multiple sessions a day. You're having multiple interview sessions, multiple review sessions. On top of that, you actually have to do the analysis work, and then the other administrative work of like being in a company, working on a team, and you're doing this for hours on end. Like, even casual conversations with your friends can make you tired. And imagine doing 4 1-hour research sessions in a day, or 2 or 3 3-hour sessions in a day. You're listening, you're observing things, you may also be taking notes. There's a lot going on. And then when you now compound what I just talked about the different kinds of trauma that could come up, whether somebody is talking about their own trauma, or is bringing up experiences for you, or you're being harassed, you're experiencing harassment or something like that in a research session, because these things happen. All of those things can result in like some serious mental exhaustion and burnout. And these are things to be careful about, to consider, to think about, even as you consider becoming a UX teacher. This is one of the like not fun parts that people don't like to talk about, because most of the time it's always like people are always just talking about like, oh, getting stakeholder buy-in, or getting people to use the insights from your research. And those things are actually like big problems that researchers face. But I think just these 2 things that I just talked about, like encountering trauma and then also mental exhaustion, are very, very important things to also talk about in the practice of research, because it can actually wear you down. So it's very, very important to take care of yourself as a researcher, as you are talking to other people, as you're doing research, as you're make sure that you're taking care of yourself, especially when you're doing research where these kinds of heavy things keep coming up, or you may be experiencing some kind of harassment or things like that. Like, find ways to decompress. If you need to go to therapy, if you need to talk to other researchers to see what they're doing and things like that, do that. So yeah, that's today's episode. Thank you for listening. Bye. Also, ask me questions. Submit a question. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Couple of Things. If there was anything you found interesting or insightful, or you enjoyed the episode, please do share to someone or multiple people. Like, leave a comment, and definitely do subscribe and all the nice things. Bye.